Good morning, Robert Scribbler filming east toward the end of Jeanette's Pier, where a foamy roller sweeps in from a still choppy and storm-tossed North Atlantic Ocean. We've got 4 to 6 foot surf conditions across the Outer Banks today, with still a pretty stiff northeasterly wind blowing at about 15 to 25 miles per hour. Still very rough stuff here today, and conditions expected to slowly taper off, but unfortunately rough conditions expected to continue at least for the next day or two, and possibly on into Thursday and early Friday. Friday might calm down a bit, and early Saturday might bring us some nice conditions, but we shall have to see, as we have had just a continuous northeast blow, which has given us this mess. It's very unfortunate after having so many nice days in late August and early to mid-September. October is coming in just kind of nasty. All right, so let's get down to some of the local wave conditions. I'm going to walk over here to the north side of Jeanette's Pier so you can see north and east. And I also do want to show you, before I get into local conditions, how far up the water is and how thin and fragile the Outer Banks are. If you look over the rooftops here, looking north and west, you can see the sound behind us. And that broad body of water, the sound is a lot like a bay. And the Outer Banks itself is a thin strip of land, much like a large overgrown sand dune, sitting between the rough and increasingly stormy and rising North Atlantic Ocean and this very changeable body of water here, which is the Sound. The Sound itself is filled by the ocean through various inlets, closest being Oregon Inlet, and is shallow but very subject to the influence of the wind. So if you have strong wind, for example, blowing from the west, you can get sound rushing in over this thin strip of land that we call the Outer Banks. And then, of course, if you have strong winds coming in from the east and northeast or the southeast, pushed by a nor'easter or a hurricane, you get water pushed up against the dunes, and in more extreme storms you get overwash and direct flooding of the Outer Banks due to high water and heavy surf, with possibility of breaking waves affecting some of these ocean-facing houses. So why am I talking about this right now before I get into the wave report? Occasionally I do get questions about clean energy and whether or not I support this or that form of clean energy. There's a lot of minutia regarding clean energy, but overall, clean energy is a much more positive and helpful form of energy source than fossil fuels being coal, oil, and gas. And wind, water, solar, electric vehicles, geothermal, all the various clean energy sources have a much lower environmental impact, both through their production, construction, and use. And in addition, they produce zero carbon emissions in use, which reduces the impact on this fragile strand of coastline that I'm looking at right now. And right now, due to fossil fuel burning here on the Outer Banks, we have about a 5.4 millimeter rise in sea level every single year. That amounts to more than half a meter, or almost 2 feet of sea level rise over the course of 100 years. 2 feet of sea level rise may not sound like much, but for thin strands of coastline like the Outer Banks, it's an awful lot. And what that means is that even if sea level rise rates continue as they are for the next century, that much of the Outer Banks is under threat and may not even be usable for future generations, for those who are going to be living for the next 50, 70, 80 years or more. And with fossil fuel burning, if it continues, that rate of sea level rise will accelerate. So the question for me is whether or not we have an Outer Banks for the future. If sea level rates, say for example, double or even worsen, which is completely a possibility if you continue burning fossil fuels, then this very thin, very fragile strip of land that we're looking at is most likely not going to last. So that's one of the reasons why I ask for everyone to please help support the mass deployment of clean energy, because that's the only way that we're going to get those sea level rates of rise down potentially, and that's the only way that we're going to prevent an acceleration of sea level rise. And right now we do have the opportunity to deploy clean energy in the form of wind offshore, and my opinion is I think we should go for it. I think it would be much more beneficial to the Outer Banks and the other forms of energy that we're presently using. All right, so I did have a question on that earlier, and I thought I would address that. Let's get into the wave report for today. Right now at Nag's Head, 4 to 5 foot plus and choppy conditions, as you can see, with an east-northeast swell at 5.8 foot and 9 seconds. North-northeast winds at 16 miles per hour. Air temperatures at 72 degrees, ocean water temperatures 71. And then down to our south at Rodanthe, we've got 4 to 6 foot waves, choppy conditions, east-northeast swell at 6.3 foot and 9 seconds. North-northeast winds at 17 miles per hour. Air temperatures 72 degrees, ocean water temperatures 72 degrees. And then just hopping up to our north in Virginia Beach, 3 to 4 foot with slightly choppy conditions and calmer wind speeds. To our south in Buxton, 4 to 6 foot waves, choppy conditions, east-northeast swell at 6.7 foot and 10 seconds. North-northeast winds at 17 miles per hour. Air temperature 70 degrees Fahrenheit, ocean water temperatures 71 degrees Fahrenheit. And last of all, at Frisco, 2 to 4 foot semi-clean conditions, east-southeast swell at 4.8 foot and 9 seconds. Northeast winds 11 miles per hour. Air temperature is 72 degrees and ocean water temperatures 72 degrees. Okay, so right now the National Hurricane Center is monitoring and issuing reports on Tropical Cyclone Philippe, which is now at tropical storm strength at 50 miles per hour, maximum sustained winds. The system is east of Puerto Rico and moving to the northwest at 10 miles per hour. Storm is expected to turn to the north, but is moving more to the west than previous forecasts predicted. Storm is still expected to turn north toward Bermuda, but is not forecast to reach hurricane strength at this time, which is different from yesterday. Yesterday's forecast had storm moving more to the east of Bermuda, but increasing to hurricane force in the later portion of the forecast. Now forecast keeping Philippe in moderate to strong tropical storm strength as it heads to the north. It's worth noting that if Philippe tracks more and more close to the United States, we might get more of a tropical influence, which would definitely be more pleasant. It does depend on whether or not Philippe links up with frontal system, in which case baroclinic forces will unfortunately continue to produce this gnarly, choppy surf condition that we have seen in the Outer Banks over the past week and a half. Worth noting also that the National Hurricane Center has no additional systems of interest for tropical cyclone development, but we do have the potential for frontal systems to sweep off the U.S. East Coast and produce gales offshore in the North Atlantic. So we are moving more to a Atlantic storm and gale regimen and less of a tropical cyclone regimen, at least over the next 5 to 7 days. We'll see if the Atlantic switches back to more of a tropical regimen of systems as we get more and more into October. We'll just have to see how events emerge. All right, so thank you for joining me for a very in-depth session of the OBX wave report. I already did my talk on clean energy earlier in the segment. Thank you guys for joining me once again. If there are waves out there that are worth riding, I hope you guys find them. And thank you for joining me once again.